Hello everybody, welcome to the Thursday edition of Video Clips. And as I mentioned on Tuesday, this flu and flu vaccine issue is so important, that's why we're dedicating both segments this week to it. So we're covering this article that was written by Dr. Doshi at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine in the British Medical Journal, and this will be posted in the HealthBrace online library shortly here. But we were talking about that the CDC had exaggerated, which they want to do these days, the benefits of the flu vaccine. The technical guidance paper that the CDC posts states that the vaccine reduces the risk of death from all causes by 27 to 50%. I find that real interesting, and Doshi writes that if these stats are correct, then the flu vaccine can save more lives than any other single drug currently available on the planet. He is amazed that CDC researchers don't seem to question how flu vaccines can prevent 50% of deaths from all causes when only about 5% of all deaths in the wintertime are caused by the flu. I mean, sometimes their manipulation of the numbers borders on stupidity when you look at the actual data. And they seem to have no shame. Another study the agency references shows similar reductions in the death rate, but the CDC conveniently omits the fact that the study followed patients not during flu season. I mean, it's just astounding to me. Doshi points out other methodological flaws in studies supporting the vaccine, such as failure to control for the healthy user effect. In other words, people who practice other healthy habits, maybe getting the shots more often, and other forms of bias. The most damning evidence, according to Doshi, is the 68-page document citing 552 references that the agency acknowledges may be biased. The guidelines state, quote, "Studies demonstrating large reductions in hospitalizations and deaths among the vaccinated elderly have been conducted using medical record databases and have not measured reductions in laboratory-confirmed influenza illness. These studies have been challenged because of concerns that they have not controlled adequately for differences in the propensity for healthier persons to be more likely than less healthy persons to receive vaccination." In other words, their own data shows that you can't rely on the studies that they cite. Doshi goes on to say that there are virtually no studies providing evidence that flu vaccines reduce deaths in older people. There's been only one randomized trial of flu vaccines in older people that showed no reduction in mortality. This means that the CDC is aggressively promoting a vaccine for older people for which there is no clinical proof. Doshi's almost as appalled that that's going on, that there doesn't seem to be any interest in getting the proof. In fact, he quotes Anthony Fauci, director of the U.S. National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, who said, quote, "It would be unethical to do a placebo-controlled study of influenza vaccine in older people because those who are getting the placebo would be deprived of the vaccine." I mean, this is almost hard to imagine. There's no evidence of value, and the purpose of the study would be to try to find some, yet he thinks that people that don't get the vaccine would be at a disadvantage. I mean, it just makes your head hurt when you think about this stuff. There are studies that do show value. For example, one study shows that in healthy adults, vaccinating somewhere between 33 and 100 people would result in one less case of the flu. Not one less death, one less case of the flu. Sign me up for that. Contrast this with CDC Director Thomas Frieden, who reported that a preliminary CDC study had concluded, quote, "The overall vaccine effectiveness is 62%. He then said that this meant that a person was 62% less likely to get the flu, but somehow when it got translated to the media, and Brian Williams and Nancy Snyderman were talking about it on national television, it got translated to a 62% reduction in death rates. You know, so it's amazing how the story gets spun into saying something entirely different. Doshi states that the CDC's recommendation that everybody gets the vaccine implies that only good can come from it, and there's no reason to consider risks. In fact, Fauci, our friend who is head of the Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, says the track record for serious adverse events is very good. It's very, very, very rare that you ever see anything that's associated with a serious event. But just a few months after that comment was made, Australia suspended its flu vaccination program in children under the age of 5 after several kids, in fact 1 in 110 vaccinated, had convulsions after vaccination. Serious reactions were also reported in Sweden and Finland, where H1N1 vaccine was associated with a spike in narcolepsy in adolescents. So amazing the contrast between the statements and the facts. Always a big disconnect there. Doshi thinks that drug companies create diseases in order to promote drugs and that the push for flu vaccines is just one more form of disease mongering. I agree. But instead of drug companies and drug reps selling sickness, in this case the sales force is comprised of public health officials who exaggerate the threat and the benefit, the threat of illness and death and the benefit of the vaccines. Last but not least, Doshi cites evidence that the makers of flu vaccines and public officials have credited flu vaccines for reducing death rates when they were already falling before the introduction of the vaccines. And this has happened with other illnesses. Polio, lots of diseases were declining rapidly long before vaccination, but the vaccine business likes to take credit for that. He says that by far the most clever manipulation of facts is the claim that the flu and influenza are the same. This is important since even the most ideal vaccine, perfectly matched to currently circulating strains, can only deal with a certain part of the problem, very small part of the problem, to the extent that one exists since most flu has nothing to do with influenza. Of the hundreds of thousands of respiratory specimens tested each year, only 16% are influenza. So he ends with this statement: all fluenza is flu, but only 1 in 6 flus might be influenza. It's no wonder so many people that flu shots don't work. For most flus, they can't. And so somebody is having the courage to speak out and tell the truth about this issue. And hopefully that gives you the courage as a consumer to walk by the folks at Walmart and Kroger and ignore the notices that are in the newspaper and the scare tactics and say, you know what, I just don't trust the government anymore to tell me the truth about this, or in my case, about anything, to tell you the truth. I just don't put much stock in what comes from government offices, particularly the Centers for Disease Control. So I guess that makes me an incredibly controversial and subversive person. But anyway, my job is to tell you the truth, and then whoever it upsets, it upsets. All right, that's it for now. I'm sure there will be more on this issue as it becomes more public in the next few weeks and the push is on even more to get everybody vaccinated. As usual, pass this on to anybody who you think might enjoy watching it, and I will be back to you again next week.